folks. Today we'll be collecting parsnip seed. So yesterday we've had a big rain event here. It was a very violent storm, and in 45 minutes we got more rain than we had from the whole of July. It was much needed rain because we haven't had any significant amount of rain for over a month now, but it wasn't without damage to some of the plants in the garden. Anyway, we are glad about the fact that it rained more than 35 millimeters actually. And while I was out inspecting today the damage to the garden and to the plants, I saw that the parsnip plant, which we left seed, has started to drop its seeds. I can see that I have to cut the leeks in a couple of days. Again, you can see that the leaves started folding, which is a clear indication that you have to cut it again. Those are our late peppers here. You can see that they now started to form fruit, and we'll be picking those in a few weeks, maybe mid-September. Plenty of new flowers as well, so I hope it will be a later frost this year. Last year we had the frost all the way in the end of October, so let's see what happens. But anyhow, I wanted to show you the parsnip plant. So this is the place where we planted parsnip, and we do that because sometimes the winters here can be pretty severe, and some of the root crops we try to overwinter, like the beets over there. They just turn to mush in the soil when the soil freezes. So we usually pick one of the best plants. We select that for seed. We keep it in the basement during the winter, and in summer, or more precisely in spring, late spring, we plant it out. And as most root crops we grow here, such as the beets and the carrots and the parsnips, they need biennial, I think is the term. They need 2 seasons of growth to form seed, and in the second year, this is what they produce. A single plant like this parsnip here can easily produce thousands of seed, and they're more than enough for us and all the people we communicate with in our gardening group to share. But you can see here on the soil that the storm shook some of the seeds down. It's likely that those won't overwinter. At least in our experience, we've never had a volunteer parsnip plant. But there are plenty more on the plant, and you can see that they're dry now, and they fall easily when you rub them with your fingers. Oh, it's a striped stink bug. Those are relatively harmless. They live on the umbellflower family flowers mostly, like carrots and wild carrots, and the parsnips, the wild fennel. So what we do now, and what I'll be doing, is I'll be cutting all the seed heads at their bases, and then I'll be gathering them on just a cotton sheet and put them up in the attic where they need to dry properly, because they're now slightly moist slightly wet from the rain, but we're forecasted for rain tonight and tomorrow again, so it's better to harvest them while the sun is shining. Oh, and by the way, one of the casualties from the storm was our red amaranth plant. I really wanted to have that go to seed and have the seeds properly ripen. They're already falling on their own. You can see those tiny white seeds here, but I don't think they're ripe. Of course, I'll be collecting some of those and trying to start the plant next year from seed, but I'm not sure that they're really ripe. It's a gorgeous plant to have in the garden. It looks great, and especially if you have plenty of seed and you can start lots of seedlings, you can eat the leaves as a baby salad, in a green salad in early spring. Okay, so I quickly picked a whole bucket full of the seed heads, and those will be now spread to dry. But I wanted to show you a couple interesting aspects. First of all, when I harvested the plant, I chopped it in pieces, and this will probably be left here to mulch and to just rot and compost in place for the winter after we put straw on the bed in late autumn. But if you have more of those plants, more of the fixed-stemmed plants, they're great to use in your compost because of that amazing feature of theirs, the hollow stems. Those are very good for providing aeration to the compost. It's a very light stem, and due to their structure, they don't compact and provide excellent aeration and structure to the whole pile. So I usually use those, and also the wild fennel stems and even the cosmos stems here. This is one of the reasons we grow so many cosmos flowers here in the garden, because the stems provide excellent feed for the compost. In fact, you can see here I just dumped a couple of stems, and they're hollow as well, so they work great for the compost. And another thing is that every time I harvest something for seed, if I have the opportunity, I always leave some standing. Of course, that's not always possible, but in this case it's very convenient, and that provides food not just for some insects such as the striped stingbug which we saw, but also for some small birds and even for ground dwelling insects, and finally worms. You can see here the beet leaves are covered with the seeds of the parsnip. We leave some of the seeds in place each year, hoping to see them germinate in spring, but we haven't had any success for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean we'll stop trying, but that's one of the reasons I always leave some of that in the garden. Here we have another umbel flowering root crop. This is a carrot, again which overwintered, and we planted in this bed uh, so we can gather the seed because we're low on carrot seeds. All those seed heads will be ripe in about maybe 3 weeks, and then we'll be harvesting them in similar fashion. I just cut them and we let them dry, and then we use our fingers to remove the seeds from the stems. You can see here that this bed is mulched. It had other crops which were harvested, and then we lightly forked the bed to aerate it, seeded with spinach, I think, the other day before the rain came. added some compost to top it off, and then mulched. It's a small thin layer of mulch, but this is enough for the spinach to germinate, for the soil to be slightly protected and not dry out as quickly. And also, if we mulch very thickly in late August, the beds don't get warm enough, so it really delays germination of the seeds. So this is a good balance, maybe just a couple of, maybe not thicker than 5 centimeters, loosely applied straw. But you can see that when we harvested whatever was growing here, we took care to protect the carrot. It's now resting on a pole so it doesn't topple down. And this single carrot, which we saved and kept in the basement last winter, will provide us with seeds for at least several years down the road. And this brings me to probably the most important point of that video, which is the inherent abundance of nature. Usually people have a bit of a hard time wrapping their heads around the natural abundance, but that leek plant, a single plant, has enough seed for us to grow leeks for several years, and each of the dozens of leeks we grow can produce more than enough seeds for us. So you get exponentially multiplying abundance. If you imagine that this single flower head will save you probably $100 in seeds, and also, most importantly, all the plants that you grow from your own seed will be more acclimated to your local soil and climate. It makes real sense to put in a little effort to grow stuff from seed. And in order to do that, you need just a little bit of planning, thinking a year in advance, and using nature's abundance. So one of those leek plants, usually the thickest and stronger and healthy looking, like this one, they will be kept in a separate bucket over winter in the basement, and we will probably select 3 or 4 plants to plant next spring to use for seed. But if for some reason those die in winter, they may dry out, or they may be eaten by some rodent, or I don't know, for any reason. Or maybe when we plant them out next spring, there will be a storm and they will snap in half and they won't grow. For whatever reason you can think of, if they don't work, we already would have the seeds which I showed you just now, and they'll be enough for several years. That doesn't mean we'll stop growing stuff for seed, but if we fail to have a harvest of seeds, we'll still have the seeds, and it still haven't happened to us to have multiple years, consecutive years of failed seed harvest. It seems like we'll have some green peppers to harvest soon. They're getting nice sized, growing good. Of course, those are also seedlings started from our own seed. They're a bit more challenging because not every year the season is warm enough for them to ripen and turn bright red, but we managed to have a few plants and usually leave the best peppers to ripen. But going back to the parsnip, and which is the most interesting and important part about it is that parsnip seeds have a very low longevity. Usually, if you're not planting less than 1-year-old seed, you have very low germination rate. We've done experiments with 2- and 3-year-old parsnip seeds, and the germination was less than 20 and less than 5% probably. We haven't counted, but looking at the amount of seeds we put in the soil and what we got as seedlings, as compared to last year's seeds, which usually give you more than 80% germination. And this is a common problem about growing parsnips. And the reason for that is that many times when you try to get seed packets from the store, it's hard to know when those seeds were harvested. Usually the packets are labeled that the seeds are best before some date a few years down the road, but with parsnip, if they're not very fresh, last year fresh, it's very hard to get a good result and consequently a good yield. I got a bit distracted here by the elderberries, which are now ripened. I tried a few, they taste great. So we will start to harvesting some of those and making sure to leave some for birds. You can see that birds have eaten from this cluster very well. It's an important late summer food for birds. So most of the clusters up there, they're left for the birds to feast on. But we still managed to get a bucket to make our elderberry syrup for the winter. So that was all for today's episode. At the end, I'll be putting a couple of photos of the parsnip harvest from last year, so you can see what happens if you try to transplant the parsnip. I mean, you raise seedlings and then you transplant those out. You get a multi-stemmed, multi-rooted root. I'm picking some of those blue plums now for tomorrow's breakfast, and I'll see you in the next one.